The Fukushima nuclear accident is ever so slowly starting to be on the minds of people, especially if you live on the West Coast or in Seattle. If you haven't heard about the dangers of the Fukushima disaster, that are worse now as deadly isotopes transmutate into more lethal chemicals, or when the nuclear fuel is unable to be cooled because of local radiation from other reactors, a meltdown and a melt through, thought of as the worst case scenario, sometimes becomes the only option. But it's been almost 8 years after the accident. And if you haven't heard, our president told us, quote unquote, not to take any precautionary measures besides staying informed. But the Fukushima nuclear accident has escalated into the worst nuclear disaster and the worst industrial disaster in the history of human civilization. Never in the history of humankind has the planet been confronted with such a grave set of circumstances. Fukushima was and is the greatest industrial catastrophe in the history of mankind. As highly radioactive gases and liquids continue to be released into the environment unabated. The scope of this problem is so great, it's almost incomprehensible, that, and maybe even thankfully, governments have banded together and are deliberately holding information, lying to the public. The radioactivity on site has been measured at 530 sieverts, but that 530 sieverts is likely to grow as they're able to get closer to the nuclear cores, which even robots can't enter into the vessels. A dose of just 2 sieverts is regarded as severe radiation poisoning. 6 sieverts produces 100% mortality rate. 6 sieverts produces 100% mortality rate after 30 days of suffering. You need to remember that all radiation is damaging. Each amount you receive increases your chance that you or any of your future offspring will have cancer or any of the other multitude of radioactive-induced diseases, of which, in regards to how humans are affected by radiation, much is known. But as Michio Kaku states, this is just another experiment of scientists to find out radiation effects on humanity and the human body. We know these details. We don't need more experimentation. If you live in Japan, Seattle, the West Coast, or how close you live to the Fukushima power plant, and the amount of radiation you received. Throughout my studies of Fukushima disaster, and even probably most people listening to this video, have continually heard that 300 to 400 tons of radioactive water are flowing into the Pacific Ocean. But researching this further, reading small print text of local Japanese reports, either having friends help translate or using the internet, I've learned that only 50 tons of radioactive water was coming down from the mountains, the hillside, that was cut away for the power plant. Why is there such a discrepancy in what's being reported? And you could even say over-reported. Why would TEPCO Rostrum, which is now decommissioning Fukushima, inflate such numbers and make them sound worse than they actually are. Unable to locate, again on the internet, but I remember the report I read years ago about how TEPCO was flooding the units 1, 2, and 3 to cool the molten fuel, corium, that has undeniably melted down and through the structures, or at least put holes in. Understand that before March 11, 2011, there was already pumps in the basements of these buildings, because water used to leak into the buildings and would be removed by the pumps. Undeniably, there's holes in the reactors, and water seeps in and water seeps out. And as any scientist or anyone following this accident, they'll know that I use the word undeniably because specifically TEPCO has continuously been dishonest with the reporting on Fukushima, and mostly with their own citizens. When Arnie Gunderson has traveled to Japan, he says he's most alarmed by the inhumanity of the Japanese government to its people. The water used in a desperate bid to cool these fuel rods has been steadily leaking into the soil and seeping into the nearby Pacific Ocean. Cleanup workers have begun the process of removing the 1,533 fuel rods from the raised cooling pool in Reactor 4 of the crippled plant. This is considered a vital task, as the weakened structure is likely to topple in any future big earthquake. If it collapses, the fallout would likely be 10 times worse than that experience at Chernobyl from that one reactor. The process involves 36 volunteers using a crane to reach down into the pool and pluck the fuel assemblies out of the pond and lift them into a protective cast. These are then trucked away to a more secure storage facility. The process is expected to last well into 2014, and that's just one reactor. Within regards to Reactor 4, the past Fukushima ambassador to Senegal and then Switzerland, he's made it his final life's work, you could say, to educate society about Reactor 4. All of my studies and what I see, it's undeniably that Plumegate has it exactly correct. Just as what was reported days after the accident, the Reactor 4 spent fuel pool was dry. All of the fuel rods were aerosolized and atomized. There are 3 other reactors that need similar attention. They have similar numbers of fuel rods, all were running at the time of the tsunami, suffering different degrees of meltdown. The containment and retrieval process is using vast quantities of water to keep the fuel rods cool. That runs into the Pacific Ocean. So much, in fact, that there's nowhere to store it. TEPCO has already cut down the forest surrounding the plant, in place, holding undisclosed tons of radioactive water every day. The number 1 reactor's core began suffering damage 3 hours after the March 11th earthquake. 5 hours after the earthquake, the pressure vessel of the number 1 reactor was damaged. Fuel rods at the heart of Reactor 1 melted almost completely in the first 16 hours after the disaster. A major part of the fuel rods in reactor 2 melted and fell to the bottom of the pressure vessel, a melt-through, 80 hours after the earthquake and tsunami. The same thing happened within the first 60 hours at reactor number 3. Radioactive substances rose to a 5-kilometer elevation when a low-pressure system passed over eastern Japan, March 14th to 15th. The substances were blown eastward by the jet stream, traveling at a speed of some 3,000 kilometers a day, arriving on the west coast on March 18th, in Iceland on March 20th, and many other European countries on March 22nd. From the great and magnificent whales to the variety of microscopic life, this entire vast ecosystem has been poisoned. Yet we will never know the immense extent of death and destruction that Fukushima caused. Even knowing that the ocean food chain is contaminated with radioactivity, this was not reported by mainstream media. Everything that lives near the Pacific Ocean will be at risk to some degree. Across the nation and world, stocks of popular food fish are collapsing, so that more than half can be effectively fished to commercial extinction by mid-century. The familiar species we have come to know at the fish counter will no longer be in numbers high enough to catch. The ocean ecosystem is undergoing vast changes as whole schools of fish, whole categories of predator prey are being wiped out. Even if the salmon fishery remained wide open, there would not be any salmon left to catch. Salmon may already be commercially extinct. Something is killing starfish in record numbers on the west coast, affecting waters from Alaska to Southern California, causing millions of starfish to fall apart and melt away. When it strikes, it kills nearly every sea star in the area. It's happened so rapidly that some species are just missing. Canadian Pacific fishermen caught no sardines in 2013. Commercial fishermen off the coast of British Columbia came home this fall without having caught a single sardine. This is having repercussions all the way up the food chain. The sardines drive the whole system, supporting virtually every form of life. Pacific herring are now dying off in record numbers as well, bleeding out of their eyeballs, faces, fins, and tails. Everything eats herring, from whales to striped bass to seabirds. Without abundant herring stocks, the ocean food web doesn't work. Hundreds of sea turtles are washing up dead on the Pacific coast. Dogs stop breathing and die almost instantly when eating them. These animals are suffering from beta burns, which are caused by significant external exposure to beta emitters, such as radio strontiums, which have been released in copious quantities into the Pacific Ocean.